Hey, 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 everybody. Welcome to the show. Let's make sure we're all good. Looks like we are. So, hi, welcome to Critical Q&A number 515. And here I am, Chris Shelton, to answer your questions. Let's go ahead and get our usual beginning setup done here, starting with our Q&A box getting set up as our very first order of business so y'all can ask me questions. Please put your questions here, and every week we start Q&A right there. So in the comments section there, you should see something that tells you to put your questions here, and you can start firing them at me in the comments section there. If you put it in the regular comments section box, then I won't be able to throw it up on the screen and see it, and so I won't be able to answer it. So please make sure you put your questions in there. I don't think it takes super chats. I don't know that the Q&A accepts them that way. So if you want to super chat me a question, you can do so in the regular comment section. Try it in the comment box. I'm not sure. YouTube is always changing things up on us. I wish I had stable answers sometimes to some of these points, but I'm not sure sometimes if they get changed behind the scenes. Oh, thank you, Sam Slade, for your super chat, by the way. Appreciate that. And yes, I thought I would fight back the winter cold and the Mother Nature, so I thought I would register my protest. And it's cooling now here in Denver. It's in the 60s and 70s now as opposed to the 80s and 90s. But it's warmer than it was last year. And Mel is really freaking out about the fact that it's so warm right now around Halloween time. I guess coming up at the end of the month. So, I love that username. Huge seashell fan. Awesome. That's the spirit. All right. So let's go ahead and get into our usual points. I wrote myself a little note so I wouldn't forget everything. So we got that going. Let's check in with our little bundle of furry joy. Here is our Benson cam for this week. This is just, he got his hairs cut this week. So you can see a very nicely groomed Benson there, sitting in the sun like he likes to do in the back porch area. So this is him, tail going a mile a minute. He likes to hang out back here all the time, if not going out straight outside. And he'll be up in a second here. I was like, Benson, stop that. We're on camera. So he started deciding to march around in the house. So you're seeing Benson wandering through the kitchen and dining room here and just having a good old time. We took him to Mel's sister's birthday last night, and he just had a grand time hanging with her and the parents and us and everything. It was a good time was had by all. Let's put it that way. All right, so there's our Benson cam for the week. Yeah, there's. I do love my little dog. All right, let's go back to the chat screen here. Okay, so that was that. Let's do our critical thinking card of the week. Now, y'all know that I am the creator of the REM model, Reason, Emotion, Morality, REM. This is the basic human behavioral model for how we decide or how we are motivated to behave the way that we do. And the top level of this, of course, is reason. And there's also, the R could also stand for rationalizations, which is our made up excuses and reasons for things. Whereas reason-based thinking or evidence-based thinking is more rooted in objective reality, which we all kind of want to do and we all sort of believe we're doing, even though kind of, in an objective objectively reality way. If you're really getting down to the real truth of things, that there is no human being who is viewing and computing and thinking on pure objective reality, because we're only as good as, our ability to perceive the universe is only as good as our eyes, ears, all that stuff, and then all of our cognitive biases, these things. So this is why we go over this every week, is these things get in our way and make us not be able to think very well. So I always like to promote these as just a now a little public service kind of thing. We talked about that last week. Here we go, slippery slope. This is a logical fallacy, right? A bad way of thinking. Asserting that if we allow A to happen, then Z will consequently happen too, therefore A should not happen. And of course, you can see between A and Z, there's a lot of other steps. It's not just A to Z or A to Xenu. There's a lot of steps in between. And so slippery slope assumes that you're going to go right to the end just because you've started at the beginning, which is not necessarily true. Example here, Colin asserts that if we allow children to play video games, then the next thing you know, we'll be living in a post-apocalyptic zombie wasteland with no money for guardrails to protect people from slippery slopes. Don't you understand, right? Yeah, so let's watch for, because this social media is packed to the gills with slippery slope arguments 24/7. So something to watch out for. All right. The other thing I wanted to tell you guys, last weekend I got to do a talk on the REM model at the Secular Hub. I'm hoping that they recorded it, so I'm hoping it's a decent recording, and I'll try to share that with you guys as soon as I find out when they have it posted, if they post it. And I wanted to just throw a couple things at you before we get into the question answering part. And I have 2 preset questions as well for this week. Okay, so number 1, people do not question their feelings. People do not question their feelings. They question your facts before they'll question their feelings. Something to think about. And thing number 2, just a bit of a script flip in regards to how we might think about narcissism, or very self-driven people. We often talk about how narcissists lie like they breathe. They just deceive. They just drop lie after lie after lie. And they do it so casually and so easily and with such fluidity, right? Such lucidity, that you wonder, how can they do that? And another way of thinking about what they're doing is not that they're lying. They are, of course, but that they are communicating their version of reality, and their version of reality is the only reality they think matters. It's simple. I'm not trying to be super profound here. I'm just trying to share this idea that when you go and look at the world through a narcissist's eyes, and this applies, of course, to almost every human predator out there. They have narcissism disorder or narcissistic tendencies. You'll find that they're not interested in and don't care about reality as you and I, non-narcissistic people, might think about it. We have a collective view of the world and reality that we agree on, and this is the basis of our moral foundations and our laws and civics and all of that, right? And they don't think about that at all. They think about their view of the world, and so from a narcissist point of view, it's not only their ego that is blown out of proportion and their role in the world that's blown out of proportion. It's that all of reality is actually their thing. And this is where you get that whole or this is one way you could think about that that NPC thing, where they think about, the life they're living is the video game that they're living in, and every other human being isn't really a human being. They're just an NPC. They're just somebody built to be part of their world, and that's why when they create their version of reality with their lies and their statements, the way they see it is, no, that's just how things are. It's weird, but it was just something I thought I'd throw out, because it's like how Trump sees the world, for example, right? He's not living in our reality. He's living in his own. And when they cross over and conflict, this is where you get narcissists. They get kind of rattled and confused. And that's where Darvo comes in and all that, right? The effort to pound your reality into the dirt so that you accept theirs, And of course, their reality is always that they are, in charge. And if you're trying to, stop them or something, you're victimizing them, and, that whole thing. All right. Anyway, throw that out there. The other thing, somebody asked me a couple of weeks ago about progress on my book, and I very frustratedly that day answered about how I hadn't really made any progress. So I wanted to update you guys and let you know that this week I made some very serious progress on it, and I actually got 2.5 more chapters drafted out. So chapter on trauma, and there's a chapter on boundaries. And both of those are now fully drafted out. I took all my notes and ideas and everything, and finally just kind of went through it and kind of put it together in a way that might be readable by other people. And so those 2 chapters are now done. And I'm into the chapter now on, what's the one I'm on the middle of right now? Well, I'll get back to it and finish it. But I'm now getting into that. So I think it's chapter 7 I'm now drafting. So progress is being made, and I love it when it's a funny thing. I was out walking Benson in the middle of the week, and I was like starting to think about my book again, and I was like, oh yeah, that chapter on trauma. Oh yeah, this, and suddenly it's kind of like this switch turns on, and when it happens, it's like lightning. It's like you got to catch it when it's happening, right? It's like, yeah, I really want to get that down and write that. And then I came home and I was like, let's see if it still stays when I get home. And I get home and I'm like, yeah, I really want to do this. So I just spent hours just banging these things out. I love it. And I'm still kind of pumped. So I really want to get this thing done. Like I said, I have it all in my head. It's a finished product already. I really, I got it pretty laid out, but making it real is just so much work. So anyway, that's an update on that I thought you guys might want to know about. All right. So let's go to our Q&A portion now. And let's go ahead and hit up our first preset question. We have, remember, 2 of these, and I don't want to forget about them, so let's just go ahead and hit them up right now. Starting with Kay from Sweden. Could you explain how auditing works at each level of the bridge to total freedom? For example, does an auditor need to be OT4 themselves in order to audit a client who are being audited on OT4? And what about the supervisor? Are they present during a session? Second question, I've been surfing around different C of S accounts on Instagram the other day. I stumbled upon a woman climbing up the bridge very fast. She seemed to finish OT7 in just about 2 months. How come some people finish the OT levels so fast while others struggles for years? Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about this. I have done whole videos and talks many years ago on my Sensibly Speaking podcast with Sonny Pereira, who was a Scientology trained case supervisor, about the whole process of how auditing happens in Scientology, how the organization is set up for it, what auditing is. I've done other videos where I really break down, auditing in its format and its procedure and all of that. So I'm going to try to not go into this, hours long explanation right now, but you've asked me a pretty big, broad question. how auditing works at each level of the bridge. Basically, you have beginning level auditing, you have grades, pre-clear level auditing, and then you have the OT levels. And you could divide the bridge up basically into these three sections or parts. So your beginning auditing is your Dianetics Book 1 auditing, or basic introductory Scientology auditing that uses an e-meter and basically runs recall type processes where you are made to recall things in your past. And by recalling them and, over and over again, or going back over things, you're supposed to sort of spark epiphanies or realizations about past incidents and sort of remove, through communication, remove the trauma, charge, upset, bad emotion connected with those events or incidents. Dianetics seeks to actually have you go back and regress or relive those incidents, not just recall them. And by the process of reliving the incident over and over again, and talking about it as though you were in the incident again, that's another way of addressing past trauma or emotional events in your past, and perhaps sort of unburdening or removing some of that emotional upset or stress. Dianetics pretends to actually erase the trauma entirely. It doesn't, but that's what it pretends to do. Scientology is trying to release the trauma, sort of get it away from you, but it's not saying that it is erasing it as such. There's some Scientology deeper principles we could get into, but we're not going to go there right now, as far as whether things are erased or really, and we don't have to go too deep into that. The lower level auditing tends to be, there are different styles of auditing that you're going to receive. There's confessional auditing, there's listing and nulling, there's SURFAC handling, there's prep checking. All of these are different ways of doing, or different procedures that you would use in delivering auditing to people. You could prep check a subject, which is basically a procedure to take a subject and sort of fill in the blank in this list of buttons or questions you might ask a person. All of this uses the e-meter. And then there is objective auditing, which is everything I'm describing with the meter and recall and all of that is called subjective auditing. It's memory-based or in your head kind of auditing. Objective auditing is the kind of auditing where you're touching things and moving your body around and being made to do stuff like that. Touching the walls, picking up things, talking about them, stuff like that in your environment. So you have objective and you have subjective auditing. Objective auditing is all lower level, pre-clear stuff. You're not supposed to be doing objective auditing as an OT unless you're being sent back down because you missed something earlier. Objective auditing is all about, really what it's about is getting you in control and getting you very habituated to compliance. But purportedly within Scientology, that auditing is designed to bring you to present time and get you out of your head and kind of get you oriented in the physical universe. Okay, and then you have the OT levels, which are addressing, you've gotten up to the level of clear, you no longer have your own reactive mind, supposedly, even though right now you don't have a reactive mind because there is no such thing, but supposedly you get to the level of clear and there's no reactive mind. Now the job is to start addressing and dealing with your body thetans. And these are other thetans that are attached to you, which you have to contact telepathically and kind of wake up because they're sort of in a comatose, semi-conscious state. And one by one, you telepathically contact them through the processes of the OT levels. And there are 8 OT levels. The first 2 are kind of orientation sort of things. The first one's orientation. The second one is dealing with what are called goals, problem masses, and dichotomies, and this kind of weird stuff. It's very, very boring and very, very tedious auditing on OT2. At least that's what I've been told. OT3 is when you start finding out about the body thetans. And 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all deal with body thetans. So just different ways of exorcising them off of you. The end result of OT7 is you are done with all the body thetans. You've gotten rid of all the thousands and thousands of them that are attached to you. And you do this solo auditing for the most part. OT4 and OT5 have an auditor that delivers it to you, but for the most part, OT3, OT6 and 7, anyway, it's all solo auditing. And there is no one, I'm putting both of these together, Kay, because you also mentioned this person who finished OT7 in 2 months. No, they didn't. There is nobody who finishes OT7 in 2 months. That was a misunderstanding, because OT7 is a long haul. No one finishes it in 2 months. It takes years and years of auditing to get through OT7, and they'll kind of tell you or indicate to you when you're getting done. You don't get to tell them you're done. There's various things that are supposed to happen, including your body is supposed to become transparent to you as part of the OT7 end phenomena. It's ridiculous stuff. Okay, and so that's kind of how it works. The supervisor is not present with you during a session. There's a case supervisor who oversees your auditing, but they do so through paperwork, through your folder. They're not present in the session. So that's my compact answer to a very big, broad question, but I hope that gives you some more info there, okay? All right, and that's that. Let's go ahead and tackle the next preset, and then we will get to the questions that I see coming in the queue here. So the second question is from Ryan H., and it says, of all the focus on Scientology from all the different people, why has no one gone and found Pat Broeker? If anyone knows the truth, it's him, right? Has anyone ever approached him and asked him to tell his story? As I understand it, he was LRH's chosen successor. If anyone would know what really went down, it would be him, right? I am just curious if you ever heard anything about him. Okay, so Pat Broeker disappeared from the Church of Scientology in 1988 after he was basically publicly crucified by David Miscavige for attempting to take over the church. And what I know personally is that I was a public Scientologist doing services in Santa Barbara, California. And when L. Ron Hubbard died in '86, we didn't really hear too much about what was going on, and nor did I really care that much as a teenage kid going to high school at the time. I didn't really care too much about the power plays of who was running the Church of Scientology. It wasn't in my world at all. I wasn't familiar even yet with the Sea Org. But within a year of Hubbard dying, this issue came down saying that Pat and Annie Broeker had tried to do this power play and say that L. Ron Hubbard had named them as successors, when in fact they were criminals or bad people, and so they were booted. And David Miscavige had discovered this, and he was now, the one who was running Scientology, or going to make sure that Scientology was being run standardly and according to L. Ron Hubbard's wishes and intentions and all of that sort of thing. That's what I saw with my own eyes. Now, many years later, of course, I've learned that perhaps Pat and Annie Broeker were actually the named successors, or option number 2 is that Pat Broeker made a power play, or Pat and Annie did, to be in charge. They were the last people who were actually with L. Ron Hubbard in his final years. Pat and David Miscavige had been working in collusion to keep David Miscavige in charge and running things, and facilitating the communication between Hubbard and David Miscavige was Pat Broeker. So Pat and David kind of had a little bit of a relationship and understanding with each other, and I believe they were even spending the church's money on themselves and stuff like that. I guess Pat was really into horses or something. he had more attention on that than he did on actually running the church. And knowing what I know about Pat Broeker now and what I've learned about him, he doesn't strike me as the kind of man who tried to execute some kind of coup to take over Scientology. So it makes me doubt that was a thing, that he was actually, named to take over the church and stuff. I have to wonder about the legitimacy of that. But what I don't doubt the legitimacy of is that David Miscavige got them the hell out of the way, and anybody else who was a threat to him, he got them out of the way, like Vicky Asnaran and I'm forgetting his name right now. It's right there. Anyway, the people in RTC who were running RTC in 1986, 1987, Miscavige brushed them out of the way, right? So, does Pat now hold information that would, turn everything around? I don't know, maybe. He was followed by a couple private investigators for 25 years, we've learned, through documentation that Tony Ortega published. When those private investigators came forward and said that that's what they'd been doing and been being paid millions of dollars by Miscavige to do that, then they hushed it all. Then they shut down and stopped talking about it because the church came in and paid him off. But that happened, apparently, right? Broeker was followed for 25 years. And I am pretty sure he found out about that. Maybe he knew it while it was happening, or maybe he figured it out, or maybe he learned it when Tony published it. Don't know. I've never spoken with Pat Broeker and never had the ability to. I don't even know if he's still alive, to be honest with you. But he didn't have any future OT levels. That was discovered, right? Miscavige was desperate to get the OT levels from him, and he didn't really have them. And I don't know what he really knows that would be so ground-shaking or groundbreaking if it were to come out. It would absolutely be very, very interesting to hear Pat Broeker's version of events. But based on what we know right now, I think we've got a pretty good read on what happened after Hubbard died and how the church was taken over by Miscavige. So I don't know that Pat would really be that linchpin of a figure, is kind of what I'm saying. And I think it would be interesting. I definitely would love to hear his side of the story. But I don't know that it is as groundbreaking as you might imagine it to be, right? Because it's doubtful. It's up in the air as to whether he was ever Hubbard's chosen successor. And that's not to say that David Miscavige was Hubbard's chosen successor. We know that's not true. So, yeah. All right. So that's what I got for you on that. Let's go back to our host and chat screen. All right. Oh, is apostate Alex in the house? Cool. Hey, Alex. All right, let's get to the questions in the queue now. I see them piled up in my question box. Let's go to the very top. And as you guys know, I just start at the top of the queue and I just start running down. So here's the first one. Sam Slade. 1, did you notice that distant outposts of Church of Scientology, either in the US or around the world, were more lax and less tightly controlled? Absolutely. 2, did you read the recent New York Times reporting on the Zizians? Okay. Yes, I have commented on, and it's definitely true, that the farther away you get from Los Angeles and Clearwater, the more lax Scientology becomes within the Sea Org and going all the way down to the public levels. This also means it becomes a bit more random as to what kind of treatment you're going to get. You can get brutal treatment in, Queensland, Australia, or Taiwan or something, or, in some org in Italy. I mean, you get random stuff from people. But the closer you get to the management of Scientology, which is in Los Angeles, and the closer you get to David Miscavige, who tends to hang out in Clearwater, the more strict and disciplinary and vicious Scientology becomes. The attitude of how Scientologists conduct themselves becomes more hardcore, right? There's no question about that at all. And it really does have to do with vicinity to Miscavige, who is sort of the source, if you will, of so much of the hate that flows through Scientology. Miscavige is an incredibly hateful man. And so people around him get, it's contagious. And then the hysteria that Miscavige sort of, it creates in people vibrates out, you could say, from his vicinity. Okay. Oh, cool. Just looking at some of the comments here. All right. And then 2, did you read the recent New York Times reporting on the Zizians? I did not. Sorry, I missed those stories. I see a little breakdown from the New York Times every morning. I get the little intro breakdown from them, but I did not read their reporting on what's been happening with that. I'll have to look it up and see. I'm kind of thinking in the same, as I think I've said before, I'll probably do some kind of, rundown or breakdown on that whole Zizian thing, but I want the trials and the cases and everything to roll forward, kind of like what happened with Diddy, so that I can look at the whole picture and everything and all the evidence that's put forward by the investigators, so that we see all the testimonies and all of the data, and then I can give you a more satisfactory rundown than just, oh my God, it's a cult and they killed people, and like everybody else is basically doing, right? I like to go a little bit more in depth. Okay, so let's carry on here. P. Langton, hey, Chris, how do you see it if Scientology seriously tried to pay off critics with millions? How fast do you think the critics scene would fall apart? Oh, that is an interesting question. That is a very good question. What if the Church of Scientology actually tried to get serious about buying us off? That would reveal some things, wouldn't it? And how much would it take, right? One sort of, I can't help right now but think immediately about the Riyadh Comedy Festival, right? I'm sure I cannot be the only one sitting here today in, experiencing moral outrage over, some of my favorite comedians rushing off to take Saudi money to tell jokes, right, to a Saudi audience, amongst them literal slavers and human traffickers and terrorists, right, and people who enable terrorism. Would you take the money, right? And a surprising number of people on social media certainly seem to have no qualms about, yeah, of course you would. Right? Of course you would. So here we come to the Scientology space, and would Scientology critics take money from the church if that money was real money, millions of dollars, in order to shut us down and stop talking about Scientology? How much money would it take? It's tempting when you start thinking about big numbers. Would Scientology be willing to part with that kind of money to pay us off? No, they wouldn't. Now, it doesn't fit Miscavige's moral foundations to do that. He comes from a place of scorched earth. I was going to say slash and burn, but it's really scorched earth, right? He wants enemies of Scientology destroyed, not disappeared. He wants them destroyed. It's a vindictive, vengeful, righteous position that Miscavige holds when it comes to us critics. So, it wouldn't be something he would do. But would some critics take the money? Yeah, they would. You probably know who they are already. Would I? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. But it's tough. It would be a tough situation, right? I mean, if somebody started waving real money in front of me, right? Like I'm talking about 7 figures worth of money. It's tempting, but my freedom of speech is not for sale. So I would not do that. And I know that there are other people in this space who also would not do that. So it wouldn't be a strategy that would actually work to shut us all down anyway. But it would shut some people down. I'll put it that way. But fall apart, I don't think the critic scene is ever going to fall apart. And I'll tell you why. It's because Scientology is what it is and continues to create new escaped victims, right? People who get out of Scientology and come to realize what happened to them. And they demand from their moral center, right? Justice, reciprocity, let's do something about this. That's a natural human response to what the kind of stuff that Scientology does to people. That's why y'all are probably here watching in the first place, right? Is you want to see some accountability. And so do we. So that's always going to be newly created by abusive, destructive cults like Scientology. They're constantly creating new victims. So it would not, there's never not going to be a critic scene, right? There's not going to be that they're going to be able to just make us all go away. I don't think there's any group in the world that has that power or ability. And there are groups with far more money and who are far more willing to throw that money around than the Church of Scientology. And they still have, critics and pushback and stuff like that. So, yeah. So I'll just kind of put it that way. Cool. All right. Xian, did it take a while after Scientology for you not to stare at people when you talk to them? Yeah, I think it did. Yeah, I didn't realize for a few years. It took me a few years to realize I was making people uncomfortable when I would, lock eyes. I thought it was a natural thing to do. I did it all the time as a Scientologist. It was just how I talked to people. And it was only after enough time passed where I saw people, made uncomfortable by it that I realized, I maybe I should change what I'm doing here, right? I don't particularly personally have a problem with somebody looking at me or me looking at them when I'm talking to them. But I get now that let me put it this way. It's no longer in my mind that the proper way, air quotes, to talk to somebody is to be staring at them. You can have a conversation with somebody without necessarily having to look at them the whole time, right? Yeah. Okay. No, we don't necessarily know that they paid off Marty Rathbun Pineapple Pizza. We don't know that it was a good chunk of money that landed in Marty Rathbun's account that settled him to stop talking about Scientology. Just to respond to that comment there. They do throw money around in Scientology at ex-members to shut them down sometimes. That does and has happened. But for example, They never paid off Pat Broeker, and they spent enough money that they could have spent that money paying him off, but instead they paid a couple PIs to follow him everywhere for 25 years. I mean, it's just inconceivable, right? Like, what? But Miscavige did that, right? So it's not always super logical what they do. But yeah, I do have to admit, of course, they have paid people off and gotten them to go away that way. Sure. Yeah, but like Wallersheim, right? No thin dime for Wallersheim. To the bitter end did they fight for, no money on this principle that they're not going to do that they want this man destroyed before they would give him one thin dime, right? If you're familiar with that stuff. So, all right. You're welcome, Board Black Sheep. Thanks for asking me questions. All right, let's move on here. Paula Pecorini. We are bombarded by every kind of social network by fake news and deep fake. Yes, we are. More and more people put on their own channel. How do you deal with critical thinking in this scenario? Who and or what? Okay. Let me just see if there's any more follow up here. No. Okay, good. Fair enough, Paula. You're not going to be able to look at a single report or event or narrative from somebody and be able to discern just by the way they talk or the way the information is presented to you. You will not be able to tell just from that whether you're hearing something that is objectively true or not. You are no longer living in a world where a video or a photograph is conclusive evidence of a thing, nor is an audio recording. All of these are capable of being faked to a level where you would not be capable of discerning through visual or auditory or whatever that it's fake. We're there. We're in that world now. We are also in a world where the media landscape is a post-truth landscape. And I have commented on this before because, and I keep saying it, because it's so important to understand. Let me take a look here at something. Maybe I can... and this goes prior to Trump, by the way. I mean, this has been analyzed back to the Gulf War and stuff. It's basically post-factual, post-reality, post-truth. And there are different ways of describing this or talking about this. There's, of course, even a Wikipedia article I'm sitting here looking at about post-truth politics. It suggests that the public distinction, not my distinction, the public distinction between truth and falsity, as well as honesty and lying, have become, it says here, a focal concern of public life and are viewed by public commentators and academic researchers alike as having a consequential role. Yeah, okay, that's fine, but it's not really what it is. It springs from distrust. That's where I was trying to go with this, right? Is we are living in an environment where people do not trust the same common sources of information that they used to. We used to have common ground on certain principles or institutions or sources of learning that we all agreed probably true, right? Textbooks in school, the museum, you can go down to the library. The nightly news, is a relatively decent source of information. Decades ago, this was the idea or the thinking, right? Decades and decades ago. It's no longer the thinking. We have been treated to controversy after controversy that from our government and from our media institutions that has convinced us over and over and over again that it would be a mistake on our part to place our faith and trust in these institutions. And so we don't. We don't dare believe what we read in the media, or we only believe certain media outlets and not others based on ideological leanings, not factual reporting. Right? This is the rise of Fox News. This is even and the rise of CNN and stuff like that. The breakdown of the fairness doctrine, right, in media, etc. So we have this real crisis. What it comes down to is a crisis of trust. Is really the where this is coming from, and it comes from all around. Like everybody's got some level of this. I have preached it many, many times, right? You can't trust this, you can't trust that, those other thing. And so when it comes to, well, what do I do about it? You certainly need to learn, some stuff about critical thinking. For sure. Otherwise, you're going to be, a little dust bunny blown about in the wind. You're never going to have any certainty of anything. So critical thinking, the skills of critical thinking are really, really, really important. But where I think I want to go in answering this point today is to also point out that you also need to have a clear idea of the kind of the whole REM thing. I'm going to throw my model out again because this is kind of how it developed. Was critical thinking's not enough. You've got to understand the emotional components of what drives people and how they're talking to you, what they're saying and how they're saying it. Has a lot to do with, you can tell or you can start learning, where people are coming from and what's motivating them to speak by, the emotional investment and place that they're coming from in talking about stuff. Same with the moral level. Right? Where are they coming from? If they're somebody who is rooted in Christian literalism, for example, biblical literalism and evangelicism, then you're talking to somebody who is very heavily biased and is not at all talking to you from a place of objective reality when it comes to those topics and their views on it. And when that gets welded with ideology, we get the Christian nationalist, MAGA, post-truth, populist movement. Right? And there's not a lot of truth connected with that. But if you understand, those different levels of where people are operating at and where they're finding their truth from, then it makes a lot more sense, and you can discern the factualness of what they're saying from the extreme bias and belief from which they are speaking. You start separating the wheat from the chaff, right? But it requires multiple sources of information coming into you, which is hardly hardly new idea, but it's true, right? It demands that you not have a single source of information. You be actively pursuing different sources of information that are giving you information from different views, from different landscapes. Different emotional places, different moral places as well, right? Because that's just the human in us that drives all of this. There is no such thing as fully objective news, right? So you got to think with this stuff as to, well, how objective can we get versus how biased can we get? Well, you can get as biased as Fox News, where there's no truth practically at all connected with the reporting. Or you can get a bit more serious and go into some of the more hardcore journals and more serious media outlets, right? As far as that goes. And even then, still, it's always going to be, a little bit of a dice roll, because even the prestigious institutes can, it's humans, they can get it wrong. So it's a problem we're all facing right now, Paula, that we cannot trust our institutions of knowledge, and we got to do all this work to compensate for that. It sucks. I don't like it, but it's where we're at. I hope that wasn't ranty. I wasn't trying to be ranty. I was trying to answer that question. I hope that came off okay. Joe DeCeppo, did you hear about the cult in Scotland run by a Ghanaian man who took 2 wives and went to live in the mountains? News to me. The local government are trying to evict them. They'll probably struggle when it gets cold. Yeah, probably. Wow, going up to the Scottish Highlands. Yeah, no, that's news to me. I'd not heard about that one. But yeah, I think he's going to be in for a little bit of a struggle when that weather hits. All right, Sam Slade. Chris, is it never in? Can you explain what LRH meant when he said something impinges? I'm thinking a substance that is potent, intensely affecting his senses, like unfiltered cigarettes. Yeah. Okay. There's a definition of the word impinge that is referenced constantly in Scientology, because Hubbard uses the word impinge when in meter training. When you're learning how to use the e-meter, you have to make the meter read. This is the phrase you're told. You have to make the meter read. And in order to do that, you as the meter operator need to impinge on the person who's holding the cans at the other end, right? So impingement is enough force. What was the definition? Enough force to get attention or something like that, to attract attention. And, you know, there was sort of a picture of an executive sort of yelling or standing up and, rah, you know, at this guy who was falling backwards in a chair because he was being impinged upon. So it means to really, you know, hit somebody with some force. Not necessarily with your fist, but with your intention. You know, I'm going to mock up this energy beam and smack you upside the face with it. You know, I'm going to impinge on you. And this would be something that, you know, when you're using an e-meter, you would, you know, you'd have the meter here and, you know, you're over there and it's like, okay, have you ever eaten an apple, a pear, a peach? You know, you're like really hitting these words, right? A porcupine. You do these assessments on the meter, right? And you're going to impinge on this person. So that's, that's what that's about. It's really that simple. There's really not a lot more to it than that. It's really just making an impact on someone. Okay. Sort of shortened to the point. Joe DeCeppo, further info. Oh, further info. That cult in Scotland called themselves the Kingdom of Kubala. Interesting. Polyamorous and sovereign citizen type stuff, as well as the brainwashing control involved. Yeah, I get it. In other words, your typical cult 101 kind of stuff. I wonder if that's in any way related to Kabbalah or a misunderstanding of Kabbalah or something. Polyamorous, sovereign citizen. Yeah, probably just some guy trying to... Anyway, I don't know. I don't want to be dismissive or anything, of course. I'm sure this man is a bad guy. Just never heard anything about it. Don't know about it. All right, Mouse House. Have you heard of the Worldwide Church of God, a.k.a. Herbert Armstrongism? Broke up in the 90s, but I'm curious about splinter groups, some of which may have kept the most culty of the dogma. No, again, this is not one I'm familiar with as such. I probably heard Worldwide Church of God. I'm sure I've heard of them, but I'm not familiar with them in the same way I could sit here now and give some kind of rundown on, say, the Mormons or the Jehovah's Witnesses or Scientology. There are thousands of cults out there, and I'm never going to be able to keep up with all of them. But this particular one sounds vaguely familiar, but I'm not at all familiar enough, Mouse, sorry, to give you more of a rundown on that. X-Cyan, how come incidents in History of Man were never talked about in the course room or specifically taken up in my auditing? Because the modern bridge doesn't incorporate them the way Hubbard did back in the 50s. Scientology is a work of research and discovery, right? of advancements and improvements, and we don't do the old because we now have the new. And so the incidents that are covered in History of Man may well come up in your auditing if you are of a mind to bring them up or throw them into the context of your auditing, but they are not directly addressed in auditing because Hubbard developed new, faster, better techniques, don't you know? And that's what the Bridge to Total Freedom is supposed to represent, is all these new, better techniques and processes, you know, and the purification rundown and the objectives and the grades, and that's what you need. See, you don't need Piltdown Man, right? You don't need the clam. That's the answer to the question. I mean, you know, as to why that is that way. All right, John, are you going to see the new Tron movie? I am not keen to do so. Tron Ares you're talking about, and I'm not impressed. I've watched them promote this movie for the last couple months now. I've seen some of the previews and what it looks like. I get what they're doing. Right, they're expanding the franchise beyond the story of, you know, Flynn and his family, and they're imagining this idea of, you know, instead of us going into the computer world coming into, you know, our world, which has, I don't know, in a way, so many more logic trap issues than us going into their world, the digital domain, right, the cyber world. That it's just, it bothers, you know, it just kind of, I don't like that, you know, it just hits me wrong. And it just feels a little, it just doesn't feel like a movie I'm down to watch. I'll just put it that way. Okay. Jared Leto Jared Leto specifically, by the way, as the lead in the movie, is a non-starter for me. I used to be somebody who thought Jared Leto could be a lead in a movie and could be charismatic and could do an amazing job in a movie. And I understand that he has done amazing work in movies. I haven't seen them, but I understand he's done, you know, there was the one with Matthew McConaughey about the AIDS crisis, and there was another one he did about drugs and stuff. The names of these movies are escaping me right now, but Dallas Buyers Club, I understand he was amazing in. That was the AIDS one. And come on, there was this other movie that is just such a downer that I just haven't gone to see it yet, that apparently he was amazing in, that I cannot remember the name of right now. Darren Aronofsky film. It's stupid that I know stuff like that, but I don't know the name of the movie. Requiem for a Dream. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. I understand Jared Leto did amazing performances in those, but everything I've ever seen him in, he wasn't that great in. And in fact, even made like significantly worse. So that's kind of like, I didn't like him in Blade Runner, for example, right? 2049. I didn't like him in that Morbius. Morbius was one of the worst Marvel movies I have ever seen. Oh, it was awful, right? Anyway, just going on a mad roll here about Jared, but there you go. Young Matador, hey Chris, did you ever read a flag order or policy letter where the terminology or wording was so dense you had no idea what the purpose behind the document was? That's an interesting question. There were Treasury policy letters that I read having to do with Treasury accounting and number crunching, stuff like that, invoicing, really dry stuff that I had a very hard time kind of reading the same way I would read and conceptualize other kinds of policies or information. Because you could kind of run it, I kind of visually or process information in my head, so I'm kind of imagining what it looks like or how it flows or something. That's the best way I know how to describe what I do when I'm reading. And I can't do that when I'm reading, dense procedural stuff. It's like that when you read computer manuals and stuff too. It's not a flow read, right? It's like a kind of thing. There were flag orders also that were procedural sort of things, right? Committee stuff or management kind of stuff that sometimes got pretty dry and dense. At first, when I first got into Scientology, keeping Scientology working, I would have described that way. But it's just repetition and familiarity with that one that gets you past that. I had a hard time for a long time. I had a hard time with a policy letter called the Simone Bolivar Responsibility of Leaders is the name of the policy, the Responsibility of Leaders. That's a pretty dense, long policy, all about Simone Bolivar and Manuel Sanz and his whole history down in South America, as told by Hubbard after reading a book that may or may not have been historically accurate. So that was a tough read. That was a real long one also. So those are the ones that come to mind for me right now. Yeah. And of course, in terms of purpose behind the document, the Simone Bolivar policy is literally is David Miscavige's Bible. Pretty important policy. I didn't know it at the time when I was reading it. It seemed like kind of almost esoteric policy. It was kind of like, we're reading all about Simone Bolivar and history and these epic leaders. And I always imagined it applied to people who were running organizations. I didn't imagine it ever applied to me so much in my position in the church hierarchy, right? So I had a hard time connecting the responsibility of leaders to my day-to-day or my experience or existence as an executive in Scientology. It didn't really connect very well for me. I wasn't asking people to go, pink legs, go hurt people in my name and don't tell me about it, or stuff like this. It's a wild policy letter. It's weird. It's weird stuff. But it's how Hubbard thought about leadership and holding power. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, let's carry on here. Cyan, please share some moments of sweet bliss, intense pleasure, extreme happiness, and euphoria. Oh, okay. I can do that. First thing that comes to mind is a couple weeks ago, I went to a wine fest with my wife and we got to drive over the Rocky Mountains. And that was really, really nice. There were definitely some moments of Zen. There were some moments of not so much Zen because traffic happens in the Rocky Mountains too. For those of you who live here, if you know, right? But there were some moments of real peace and beauty driving over those mountains. And even out in Grand Junction, took some pictures and stuff. That was real nice. Nothing quite hits intense pleasure and extreme happiness like the way that I will say, since we're just between us girls here, the way that psychedelics can create a peak experience that is not connected with, at least the way I did it in the context I put myself in, was not in any way connected with any ideology or belief idea or spiritual, concepts or anything like that. It was just, what's this gonna do? And it puts you in a place that is beyond words. I have to say that first, and I know I'm not the only one who's said that. Psychedelics puts you in a headspace that is very difficult to describe. But one thing that is very clear, and I struggle with people who say they've experienced this and then act the way they do afterwards, like Joe Rogan, for example. He's claimed to have had this experience, but I don't see evidence of it in the way the guy behaves. And that is that there's an experience, a peak experience of connection with not just humanity, but a feeling and a perspective that the words like awesome or incredible or big or spacious, I mean, they just don't even begin to describe the experience. It's universe bending, you know, it's so big. And it just gives you this feeling of connection with every living thing that is so heady and so emotional and really impactful, and very emotionally impactful experience. I wish it on everyone. It's kind of one of those Scientology, you know, do you wish others had the knowledge you now have? Right? Would you want others to have the experience? What was it? Would you want others to have the knowledge you now have? Yeah, something like that. Anyway, those key questions you asked, I would totally want that wish that on other people. You just wish the follow through, you know, once you have that experience and you realize that, it's like, good, act like you know that, you know. Anyway, okay. Actually not in a bad mood today, by the way, as opposed to last week. Last week I was in a pretty bad mood. All right, let's see here. Ms. Tara Green, do you ever cry? Do cult members cry? Do cult leaders cry? Do narcissists cry? Yes, I do cry. All the time. I am the worst in movies. I actually figured out Pixar and who are the other guys? Maybe just Pixar. You know those animated movies, the like kids, right? Wreck-It Ralph and Up and some, maybe not Up. Up is a whole different class of thing, but the one about the emotions, right? Like all those animated movies, they have it timed out formulaically. Like I figured it out. I'm sure you have too. That in the third act, at the beginning of the third act, when the big maybe beginning to middle of the third act, somewhere in that time period, I'm going to lose my shit. I'm going to absolutely, you know, the character is going to have this moral epiphany, this big wake up moment, and I'm going to be there, and it's just going to be, oh, you know, and it happens over and over again in these bloody animated movies, which is kind of why I stopped watching them. Anyway, yeah, I'm a wuss when it comes to that. Do cult members cry? Yeah, cult members cry all the time. Tears of joy and tears of sadness, tears of violence, tears of anger. Cult members cry. Yeah. Do cult leaders cry? Yes. Cult leaders cry alligator tears in order to, you know, siphon sympathy off of people, or they cry for real. Sometimes cult leaders are true believers. They have deep wells of emotion that they draw from, and sometimes they cry. Absolutely. Do narcissists cry? Probably not as often as all the rest, but a narcissist is a human being who is certainly capable of crying. Yeah, for any number of reasons. All the emotions that cause that, right? Anger, fear, upset, sorrow. Xenu's prison guard. Have I ever stolen an apple? No, not me. Apostate Alex, what's it going to take to get you over here for the IAS protest this year? Oh my God. Oh my God. Money and time. It's actually this year, even if I had money and time, I wouldn't be able to. I can't get into any of the details with you guys at all, but I am involved in another expert witness thing, anyway, so the timing of it doesn't work so well. That's all I'm going to say about it. But thank you for asking, Alex, and for that. I would I'd love to try again next year. I'd love to try to get out there. I just, money and time, mostly money, and the logistics. Yeah, broke ass bitch. Okay. Clearwater Chad. Okay, let's see what you have for me. Have you heard of mescavism? Oh my God, some weird artificial intelligence cult or something like that. How funny that you would ask me that, Clearwater Chad. I'm just going to move on because, yes, I have heard of mescavism, and it's, yeah, it's a little weird. I don't know about the AI cult part of it. I don't know that that's part of anything I'm familiar with it. Vladimir Zelensky, do you ever worry you are creating a YouTube cult? No, I definitely do not worry about that at all. One, I'm not a cult leader. Two, I don't want to create a cult. Three, I'd go to great pains to tell you guys things over and over and over again that would prevent me from being a cult member. And there is no dogma here that I'm preaching any more than any science type person is preaching dogma. It's efforts to understand ourselves and each other. That's what this channel's, themed around. So no, those aren't culty things. I mean, they could be, anything could be made culty, but not the way I'm doing it. No. And then Chad asks again, did mescavism steal off Scientology? No, I didn't see any indication that they did that. Okay. And that, my friends, is the last question in the queue right now. It's interesting. Last few weeks, we're losing viewers, just so I say this out loud, right? And I'm not sure what I'm, why or what I need to change or if I need to change anything. Actually, not really overly concerned about it, but it's just a point. We don't really even fill out 2 hours over the last few weeks. And I don't know if it's time of year or if it's me or if it's you or what it is, but I'm just going to comment on that. It's interesting that it's changed. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not overly worried about it. I am much, much, much more focused these days on getting this book done, and then I have another book I need to write on the REM model itself. But first, I'm going to finish this cult recovery book, which will include REM model stuff. And that's at least it's on the list of things to do again, right? That I can work on. And I owe you guys some videos. I've got so many podcasts in the queue right now. I've got about 4 or 5, maybe 6 pre-recorded right now. Some really good stuff coming. And I hope you guys have been checking out what I put out. Yesterday's podcast with Jenny Gage was important and really, really, really interesting. Because I finally got to really get into it, not argue with her, but really get into the hypocrisy, the basic root hypocrisy of these Christian nationalist MAGA folks claiming to be Christians, and really finally coming to realize how that really is in name only. They are not Christians in any sense of the word. They even reject the teachings of Jesus. I mean, straight up, right? So they're Christians who hate Jesus. And these are the MAGA Christians. I mean, these guys are just wildly insane. Not clinically. I mean, they're just the stuff they think, about their Christianity is just, it's offensive. It's so badly corrupted. So, and I'm not even a Christian. I'm not even religious in that sense, but I can certainly judge their religion because it's a hate group. And it was really clarifying to kind of bring it down to that simplicity, because I've been trying for years to define and describe and talk about the MAGA mindset and Trump's mindset and all that from my understanding of it. And it was nice to talk to her and just Jenny, because she's a former Mormon, former MAGA. And she just got right to the heart of it, just follow the money, right? Just here's the principles, right? And I was like, oh yeah, okay, got it. So it was cool. It was good. Yeah. Oh, should I consider changing the day? I mean, I could. It's been interesting changing the Tony show to Saturday. It's messed my whole my whole workflow is kind of like all in flux right now. You know, it's all different. So yeah. Yeah. Anyway, not sure if I'm, you know, doing something wrong, and if I am, you know, you all let me know if there's something I should change. But otherwise, I'm just going to kind of keep carrying on here and trying to get this book done and all of that. I've been having also been having a real good time working with some people, ex-Scientologists mainly, you know, via the Aftermath and stuff like that, consulting with people. So that'd be cool. Yeah, I really did. Really enjoyed talking with Jenny. So we are going to talk more. And you're also going to hear more from the former JWs that I have been speaking with. Michael Shemwell and, come on, Bethany Laguerre. I'm going to try to, my secret plan that I'm totally sharing so secretly here, is to get both of them to come on. And then we can do kind of a, get both of their inputs, male, female, both grew up in the JWs, and I have 3 areas already that I really want to go deep with them on, as far as talking about JW practices, beliefs, and the organization structure, and that kind of stuff. So you're going to see that. Hopefully you'll see them. Yeah, anyway, I'll arrange all of that. And then I've already got another podcast in the queue right now with my former Mormon friends, Bryce and Shannon. And I was on their show recently that just posted this last week, talking about the REM model on their channel. So there you go with kind of what's up right now. Oh, okay. Anti-Scientology legal docs on your channel. Okay, whiteness. All right, cool. Yeah, throw a link up. Let's get people to go take a look at them. Send me an email. Let me know what you're doing. I'm curious what you're posting. I'll be happy to take a look at it, and if it's, you know, what I think it is or whatever, I'll endorse it. Okay. Good. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up then. I don't think I have any other points I need to make today. Sorry, just getting... Okay, got it. Okay. Thanks for coming around and watching me blabble on at a mad rate, like I always do. I've been super busy, so there haven't been midweek live streams, and that's probably going to continue for the next few weeks. I've got a really packed schedule, but you will continue to get every week podcast, Q&A show, and of course my show with Tony every week. And if you're not subscribed to my Critical Clips channel, I am still posting Monday through Friday every day. A clip goes up around noon. From my earlier Q&A shows as individual clips. And I'm also trying to get YouTube shorts posted as much as I can get to that work during the week as well. So there's no shortage of content for y'all. Anyway, let me know what you all want from me, and I will see you guys soon. Bye-bye.